Tony, am I on? Can you hear me back here? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. You know, before we begin continuing our study of the book of Proverbs this morning, I don't know. I guess I feel compelled to say a little bit about Mike's lesson this morning. I will tell you, I think we are extremely blessed here to have Brother Mike Green as our preacher. Okay, his lessons are scriptural. They're inspiring. They're powerful. And I thought that this morning's lesson was especially so. Not sure what you thought, but I did. I really don't want to add anything to it because I would just do harm to it, quite frankly. But I will say this. Those of us who are old, and that now includes me, has for some while, but certainly includes me now, it seems as though we always think that times are the worst they've ever been, if you will. I don't know. I think maybe my parents thought that. I think maybe my grandparents thought that. So maybe they are, that maybe they aren't. I will say this, though. I'm convinced of this. At no time in my life, and I've lived a lot of years now, not as much as a few in here, but I've lived a lot of years, and more than some who are in our audience this morning. I have never seen a time in my lifetime where, as Mike said, that the foundations of our society and our culture seem to be destroyed more than they ever have been in my lifetime. The foundation just of morality and ethics and the standards by which we live, standards that have been basic standards of strong cultures and societies for many years, it seems to me. And as I said, I've never seen a time. Don't know what you think, but I've never seen. I'm sure of this, that I've never seen a time in my lifetime where they are being more destroyed or less respected or less reverenced or less paid attention to than they are at this time in my life. And I tell you what I think that means, or part of what I think it means. I've said this for some time, and I've thought this for some time. I've said this in elders' meetings from time to time when we were talking about certain things. And I think it means exactly what Mike said this morning. That if what I just said is true, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But if it is true, and if things don't get better culturally and as a society, then brethren, I will say this to you. We as Christians better stick together as a family. Okay? It seems to me. We better stick together with a sense of community, with a sense of who we are, to support, to encourage, to strengthen one another. So, I don't know. It just seems that way to me and has for some time. Let's continue on with our lessons from the book of Proverbs. Remember we're only in a lesson 5 now. I think the introductory lesson took us about 3 lessons, so we've been at this a little bit longer than 5 weeks or whatever, but we're in, at least what in my notes anyway, is lesson 5. And remember, we are calling this series, Don't Be Dumb, the wisdom of Proverbs for today. All right? Last week, you remember, we talked about don't be dumb about self-control. This morning, we're going to talk about some teachings from the book of Proverbs, and we'll entitle this one, Don't Be Dumb About Money. I want to tell you a story about the Roby millionaires as we start to introduce our lesson this morning of what Proverbs has to say about money. Anybody remember or ever heard of the Roby millionaires? Anyone? I took this from, I've told you a couple of times, 2 or 3 times probably, that I'm using Brother Tommy South's book, which he entitles, the wisdom of, Don't Be Dumb, the wisdom of Proverbs today. That's where I got the title for all of this. And his book on Proverbs to help me prepare for these lessons and to help me study the book of Proverbs And so Tommy tells this story in his section that talks about what Proverbs has to say about money. And I think I actually heard this story. I think I did, but I'd forgotten about it. Let me tell you about the Roby Millionaires. They're sometimes called the Roby Millionaires, or they're sometimes called the Roby 43. Now, it's particularly significant to Tommy because Roby is a little town in Texas. And if you know Tommy, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Some of you I know do. If you know him well, you know that Tommy grew up in Texas, and evidently Roby, Texas is not far from where he grew up. It's a farming community of just a few hundred people, as I understand. And in 1997, long time ago now, but in 1997, 43 residents of that little community of Roby, Texas, became instant millionaires by pooling their money together and then winning the Texas lottery. So their story went worldwide, almost overnight, with the town being covered in the national media, and various members of this Roby 43, of the 43 appearing on the talk show circuit. It's my understanding that Roby is kind of a hard luck town, if you will. Some of us have seen hard luck towns, and it's kind of a hard luck town where most folks barely get by. But with that windfall, it gained the distinction of being the town with the highest number of millionaires per capita in the entire United States. But as Paul Harvey would say, we need to consider the rest of the story, because that's not the whole story. In a follow-up story several years later, also done in the national media, it was reported that most of the instantaneous millionaires in Roby, Texas, had gone broke. It was reported also that there were deep divisions within the community there in Roby, and especially among the 43, if you will, the 43 themselves, and even strife within their family over their newfound wealth. Some of the lucky 43 had also died, tragically. So even all those millions of dollars didn't make the town a happier, more prosperous place, and it is my understanding that still today it struggles to survive. So money wasn't the answer for Roby, Texas, and it seldom is. So what do we think? Kind of an obvious answer to my questions, but what do you think? Do you think Proverbs provides any wisdom about money? Have you done any reading in Proverbs with comments from Proverbs about providing wisdom about money? Have you? I don't know if you have or not. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. Well, I think you know the answer to that. Certainly Proverbs does provide wisdom about money. We said at the beginning, and all along we have said, that Proverbs is a book of practical wisdom. And since it is a book of practical wisdom, it's not surprising at all that it says a great deal about money. Let me ask you this question. Is money a fact of life we have to deal with? Yes. Is it? Absolutely. Okay. We can talk about it being good. We can talk about it being evil. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's evil, I suppose. Probably not in and of itself. Sometimes maybe it creates evil, I probably should say. But whatever we say about it, it certainly is. It indeed is a very practical part of life. And if Proverbs didn't say a good bit about money, then I don't think Proverbs would be a very practical book. Because again, money is indeed a fact of life we have to learn to deal with. And in learning to deal with it, it takes wisdom. And I think sometimes a lot of wisdom. You know, money can be either a great blessing or a great curse. It all depends on whether or not we learn to be wise in our pursuit of it and our use of it. Let me ask you this question. Have you ever seen any books, seminars, DVDs, TV shows, etc., focused on teaching people how to get rich and spend wisely? Have you? All of the above, okay. That's what Betty says. Ryan smiled and nodded his head. Yes, I didn't see any of the rest of you really. Didn't catch your expression or whatever, but I know you have. They're just all over the place. All of these books. Again, seminars we get invited to all of the time, DVDs, TV shows. There are an untold number of these. You know, I thought about a lot as I was preparing these notes, and as I knew I was going to be teaching this lesson. You know, obviously for 46 years now, okay, I have made my living dealing with money. I mean, that's what I do. For 46 years, I've had a practice of being a financial advisor. So obviously I get involved with money a lot. And believe you me, not just you, but I've read a lot of books. I mean, a lot of books about money and about how to invest and what I should recommend to my customers, what I should recommend to my clients, and on and on and on. And you know what? A lot of these books, some of these books at least anyway, are good, they're honest, they're fair, and at times they're helpful. But if all of these many money experts have the answer to acquiring and using wealth, why aren't more people better off after reading them? Because I don't find people a whole lot better off, okay? I don't find people a whole lot better off after reading them either generally, and through the years, I haven't found people being a whole lot better off after reading them in my practice, okay? In what I do for a living, okay? So I think the big question is, in a lot of these books, DVDs, seminars, and I'm not saying all these people are being dishonest or deceptive or anything. I'm not saying that at all, because I've already said there are a lot of good ones, okay? And so forth. And there are a lot of helpful ones, I think. But I think the big question is, how much godly wisdom do all of these books, DVDs, seminars, so on, really contain? So, to give us that basic and much needed wisdom, I think, Proverbs offers at least 7 rules about money. There may be more, but I've kind of picked out 7, and with Tommy's help, quite frankly, I've picked out 7. 7 rules about money, and again, how not to be dumb about it, okay? Now, these rules are not found in the book of Proverbs in one text. Don't look for them in one text. They're not there, okay? Or in one paragraph, or in one narrative, or even in one chapter of the book. It's not like that. Nor are they listed in 1, 2, 3 fashion as I'm going to list them this morning. Rather, they are scattered throughout the book. But they definitely give us words of the wise, these wise authors of the book of Proverbs. And again, we've talked about the fact in our introduction there's more than one author to the book of Proverbs. They give us wise words of the wise regarding money. So let's consider 7 rules. Proverbs is 7 rules about money. Number 1, you might think that we would start here. Not necessarily going to say this is where Proverbs starts, but it's where we're going to start. Rule number 1, before you do anything else with your money, honor God with whatever you have. Again, I would think that many would think that's where I would start this morning. If we were talking about 7 rules having to do with the use of money, probably a lot of you would think in a Bible study situation that this is where we would start. But it's something definitely that Proverbs recommends, not only recommends, but instructs us to do. Before you do anything else with your money, honor God with whatever you have. Turn to Proverbs chapter 3. Proverbs chapter 3. Ryan, you still got the ESV this morning? All right, so I might be asking you to read some from the ESV as we go on here, okay? Let me grab my phone, because I have my phone set to the ESV. I find this, I've been doing my studying or whatever and so forth. By the way, I bet you I've said this before. All right, that's a phrase I probably shouldn't use, okay, either. That has to do with money. But anyway, I'm sure I've said before, one of the great things about these cell phones, and the Bible apps you can get, if you haven't done this, try it. Download a Bible app to your cell phone or whatever, because if you do that and you get the right Bible app, you'll be able to study all the translations you want to study almost right there in front of you and just go back and forth between them. And it's a real helpful aid to Bible study, okay? But anyway, Proverbs 3, verses 9 and 10. Let's read that passage. Proverbs 3, 9 and 10. Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase. So your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. I'll read it one more time. Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase. So your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. Okay? Ryan, help me out a little bit. Read those two verses, if you will, from the ESV for me, if you would.
Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. And your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine.
Okay, so just in case, the New King James Version that I have says possessions. Honor the Lord with your possessions. The ESV, as Ryan just read to, it says, honor the Lord with your wealth. And then it continues, and the New King James says, and with the first fruits of all your increase. And again, as Ryan just read to us, the ESV says, with the first fruits of all your produce. We would probably expect in ancient Israel that it might talk about increase, that it might talk about produce. Obviously, ancient Israel was an agrarian society, and so it would talk about a lot. It would make sense about their crops and what they were growing and the produce and so forth like that. But anyway, honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruit of all your increase. It's a simple, I think, precise and direct teaching. But let's expound on it a little. Matter of fact, we're going to expound on it a good bit this morning, okay? I doubt very seriously, it's 12 o'clock now, so I doubt very seriously in the next 15 minutes if we'll this morning finish all of these 7 rules that Proverbs gives us about money. So we'll finish as many as we can this morning and finish the others next week. But let's do a little bit more studying about this particular passage here, Proverbs 3, 9, and 10, okay? Turn to Deuteronomy 26, if you will. Deuteronomy 26. Let's just get a little bit more input here about these first fruits. Deuteronomy 26, and we're going to read here verses 1 through 11. Deuteronomy 26, verses 1 through 11. Being spoken here to the Israelites. And it shall be, when you come into the land which your Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, and you possess it and dwell in it, that you shall take some of the first of all the produce of the ground, which you shall bring from your land that the Lord your God is giving you, and put it in a basket, and go to the place where the Lord your God chooses to make his name abide. And you shall go to the one who is priest in those days, and say to him, I declare today to the Lord your God that I have come to the country which the Lord swore to our fathers to give us. Then the priest shall take the basket out of your hand and set it down before the altar of the Lord your God. And you shall answer and say before the Lord your God, my father was a Syrian, about to perish, and he went down to Egypt and dwelt there, few in number, and there he became a nation, great, mighty, and populous. But the Egyptians mistreated us, afflicted us, and laid hard bondage on us. Then we cried out to the Lord God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice and looked on our affliction and our labor and our oppression. So the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm, and with great terror and with signs and wonders. He has brought us to this place and has given us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And now behold, I have brought you the first fruits of the land which you, O Lord, have given me. Then you shall set it before the Lord your God and worship before the Lord your God. So shall you rejoice in every good thing which the Lord your God has given to you and your house, you and the Levite, and the stranger who is among you. Okay? So here, we see this first fruits mentioned again here. God is telling Israel something they are to do when they come into the promised land. So what was his instruction to the Israelites that we just read? When they came into the promised land, what was his instruction to them? Excuse me? I'm sorry, Carrie. Say again. All right. All right, to give of their inheritance and possessions. Okay? All right. All right. Any other thoughts? Yeah, that's exactly what he was telling them to do. Once you're in the promised land and have harvested your very first crop, take the fruit portion, the first portion rather, harvested, and offer it to the Lord. Why? According to the passage, why? According to Deuteronomy 26, why? Why were they to do this? Why were they to, of the very first crop, take the first portion, the first fruits of it, and offer it to the Lord? Why? I'm sorry? Because the Lord is the reason they have it to begin with. That is exactly right. That is exactly correct. That is exactly what he says to them. Notice again in verses 8 and 9. So the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm and with great terror and with signs and wonders. He has brought us into this land and has given us this land. Not only that, not just that land, but a land that was flowing with milk and honey. That's exactly right, Ryan. That's exactly why, okay? In recognition of his goodness to them, and with the realization that without God, no such harvest could have occurred, all right? That's the reason why they were to give. The first fruits were to be given back to God. Let me ask you a question, brethren. Is the same not true for us? Has he not provided our harvest? Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay? I know that's true in my life, that he has provided the harvest for me. What harvest I have, and he's blessed me greatly. And I know that it is my God that has provided this for me. Yes, I've contributed. Yes, I've worked. But I know it's by the grace of God. And I know it's by the hand of God. And I know that he's provided that for me, that he has provided that harvest for me. Okay? All right? But I want to submit to you something. Let's think about what the Israelites were doing specifically when they did this. When they did what God instructed them to do, when they gave back to him, to these things he had blessed them with, the harvest he had blessed them with, when they gave the first fruits back to him, what were they accomplishing? What do you think they were accomplishing? How about telling me? What were they accomplishing when they did this? To me, there's at least two specific things that they were accomplishing as they followed the Lord's command and they gave back to him the first fruits of the harvest, if you will. What were they accomplishing? What were they specifically doing? Can you think of specific things they might have been doing? Excuse me? They were being obedient, okay? All right? Absolutely, obedient to the command that they were given and that we just read in Deuteronomy. What else, though? What else were they accomplishing when they did this? Excuse me? I'm sorry, Ryan. Worship? Absolutely. I think it was a worship, okay? Anyone else? Gary?
They were acknowledging the great miracles that he had provided.
All right.
And protection that they had given.
Absolutely. We read about that. The signs and wonders that he wrought and the terrors that he wrought while they were in Egypt to have them saved from the Egyptians, delivered from the Egyptians. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Putting their trust in him.
Absolutely. Okay? All of these are good. All of them are right. All of them are sound. Thank you. That's one I had down. And when I was thinking about it, and I wrote down in my notes at least two specific things. One of them is they were showing their trust in God. Okay? They were showing, it seems to me, that just as he had provided the first fruits, so would there be second fruits, if you will, or third fruits. Okay? So they were showing their trust in God. There's one more. It's kind of like worship that Ryan said. To me, they showed honor toward God. That's worship, okay? So, I mean, I said two specific things. I like all of these. I said two specific things. They showed honor toward God as well as their trust in Him, okay? All right? So, we know this. Many of you have been in the church for a long time know that this first fruit giving became the norm in Israel. At least it was to become the norm in Israel as God commanded it. And so I asked the question again, shouldn't it be the norm for us? Okay? And obviously it should. And that's why we say, rule number one, before you do anything else with your money, honor God with whatever you have. Okay? But let's go back to Proverbs 3 and 9 and 10 and just study it a little bit more. Let's study this passage a little bit more, both in a positive and a negative view, because I want to submit to you that this passage has been both used properly and misused in the religious world. And this is another time where we have to study the Scriptures and rightly divide the Scriptures as we're instructed to do in the New Testament, okay? You know, you read Proverbs 3, verses 9 and 10. Let me get back there. You read it, and it says that if this practice is followed diligently, there will always be plenty of produce and wine, if you will. Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruit of all your increase, so your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. Okay? Is that the reason we should give back to the Lord? Stretch that to our day, that the reason we should give back to the Lord is because our barns will be filled and our vats will be filled with new wine, if you will. That is, in our day, that we will be prospered, that we will have great wealth, that we will have all of these things. Is that the reason we should give back to the Lord? No, I don't think so, okay? And I bring this up, and now we have 5 minutes left, so we'll finish rule number 1 this morning anyway. The latter part of this passage has caught the attention. How many people have paid any attention, or how much do you know about the health and wealth gospel? Well, it's a gospel that's taught, and a lot of people fall victim to it. The interesting part of it is those that teach the health and wealth gospel are the ones that seem to have the health and wealth, okay? Or at least the wealth. But anyway, the latter part of this passage has caught the attention of many purveyors of the health and wealth gospel. The idea that by following certain practices, one can guarantee God's financial blessings. But I think there's something we need to learn here, brother, and I think there's something we need to learn, that that's not the teaching of the passage, and that's not why we give back to the Lord. That's not why we honor God with the first fruits, and we honor God with our money, okay? The point here isn't to invest in God, if you will, but to honor God. It isn't a manipulative technique. That is, to manipulate God and try to manipulate Him. He can't be, but to try to manipulate Him to extract blessings for God. Rather, as we've already said, it is an act of trust in God with the assurance by putting Him first, we will all have what we need. Okay? All right? So again, we need to be careful with the teachings of Scripture. Remember what we said about Proverbs when in our introductory lesson to Proverbs, and this applies to a number of the Proverbs that were given. We said that Proverbs are not what? Do you remember? And we gave a couple of examples. Proverbs are not promises. They're not promises, and they do not need to be studied that way. And they do not need to be taken that way. They are indications about what usually will happen if wisdom is followed. What often happens is wisdom is followed, but not necessarily what always happens. And they can't be taken as secure promises. And this one shouldn't be taken that way. It shouldn't be taken by the health and wealth folks. It shouldn't be taken that way by us, okay? Let me ask you something, though. As we read Proverbs 3, 9, and 10, does it sound very similar to a teaching of Jesus? All right, to have life and to have it more abundantly. Okay, absolutely. I think it could tie in with that. Again, I was thinking of another one. Does it think? That's good, Gary. Thank you. I was thinking another one that it sounds, honor the Lord with your possessions and the first fruits of all your increase, so your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will overflow with new wine. One more time. Does it sound like a similar teaching of Jesus in the New Testament? Obviously, being the New Testament is Jesus, okay? Does it sound like a teaching of Jesus?
He's going to give back in such a measure, it's going to be pressed down, shook, and pressed down again.
I love it, okay? That's exactly right. Mike, did you have your hand up back there, bud? Absolutely. That's the one I'm thinking of. Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things that were talked about in the previous verse. All the things about clothing and food and things that we need in life. All of these things will be added unto us. Sounds very similar to that teaching to me, okay? All right. Has the first bell rung? Okay. I look at the clock and it says 12:14. It means we have 1 minute to go. All right. Okay. So I'm going to stop. Okay. We got through run rule. All right. All right. We will get through the other 6 next week. Proverbs 7 rules, one of which we covered, and we'll do our very best to get through the other 6. Proverbs 6 rules, at least 6. You may find some more. Study and see if you can find some more. Well, you don't know what the other 6 are yet. But anyway, study and see how many you can find. Okay. And we will study the other 6 rules next week. Okay. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate it.